Today, we wake in climate-controlled homes, adjust the thermostat with a fingertip, and complain when a winter storm delays our commute. We expect fresh food year-round and layered synthetic clothing that shrugs off sub-zero temperatures. Yet, for most of human history, our ancestors confronted a planet gripped by ice. During the Pleistocene epoch, vast ice sheets advanced and retreated in cycles lasting tens of thousands of years. The most recent glacial maximum, between roughly 26,000 and 19,000 years ago, turned much of the northern hemisphere into a frozen wilderness. How did small, vulnerable bands of humans not only survive these conditions, but lay the foundations for everything that followed? Their story is one of relentless adaptation, where every innovation solved an immediate threat and made the next advance possible. Picture the world they inhabited. Glaciers, 2 miles thick, covered Canada and stretched south to the Great Lakes. In Europe, ice entombed Scandinavia and reached into northern Germany. Sea levels dropped more than 400 feet, exposing continental shelves and creating land bridges, most famously Beringia, which connected Siberia to Alaska and opened the gateway to the Americas. The landscape was a cold, dry steppe tundra. Forests retreated southward, endless grasslands dotted with shrubs and hardy herbs supported immense herds of animals. Woolly mammoths, with their long curved tusks and thick shaggy coats, thundered across the plains. Woolly rhinoceroses, giant deer with antlers spanning 12 feet, bison, reindeer, and cave lions shared this unforgiving realm. Winters were long and brutal. Summers brief and intense, dust storms whipped across the open land, and temperatures in many regions averaged 10 to 20 degrees Fahrenheit colder than today. Into this world, anatomically modern humans, Homo sapiens, moved from their African origins. They had already mastered fire, a technology with roots stretching back at least 400,000 years, possibly earlier. Fire was the first great equalizer. Without it, extended survival in latitudes above 40 degrees north would have been nearly impossible. A single spark, carefully tended and transported in embers wrapped in moss or bark, could mean the difference between life and death. Fire provided heat, light, protection from predators, and the ability to cook food, dramatically increasing caloric return and reducing disease. It thawed frozen ground, hardened spear tips, and created social spaces where knowledge could be passed across generations. As modern humans pushed northward around 45,000 years ago, they encountered another human species already adapted to the cold, the Neanderthals. Neanderthals had lived in Europe and Western Asia for more than 300,000 years. Their bodies were robust and stocky, with barrel chests, shorter limbs, and large noses that helped warm and humidify frigid air. They possessed large brains, sophisticated stone tools, and evidence of fire use, hunting, and possibly symbolic behavior such as burying their dead with offerings. Yet their population densities remained low, and their technological toolkit, while effective, changed slowly over time. When Homo sapiens arrived, the two groups overlapped for several thousand years. Genetic evidence reveals interbreeding. Most people of non-African descent carry between 1 and 2% Neanderthal DNA today. Some of these genes influence skin pigmentation, immune response, and adaptation to lower ultraviolet light. Exactly why Neanderthals eventually disappeared while modern humans persisted remains a subject of ongoing research. Possible factors include greater population numbers and social networks among sapiens, more flexible technologies, and the ability to exploit a wider range of resources. What is clear is that the meeting of these two lineages enriched the genetic and cultural toolkit that allowed modern humans to thrive where others had struggled. The next critical adaptation addressed the body's greatest vulnerability in the cold: exposure. Simple hides provided basic cover, but they were heavy, stiff when frozen, and offered limited protection against wind. The development of tailored clothing marked one of humanity's most consequential technological breakthroughs. Archaeological finds from sites like Denisova Cave in Siberia and sites across Europe show eyed bone needles appearing around 40,000 years ago. These delicate tools, often less than an inch long with precisely drilled holes, allowed precise stitching. Picture the labor-intensive process. After a hunt, hides were scraped clean of fat and flesh using stone scrapers. Brains or smoke were used to tan them, making the leather supple and resistant to rot. Women and men worked together, punching holes with awls and threading sinew or plant fibers through the eyes of needles. They created layered garments, soft inner tunics against the skin, insulating middle layers of fur and outer windproof shells. Parka-like coats with hoods, leggings, mittens, and boots lined with fur completed the outfit. These clothes were so effective that people could remain active for hours in temperatures far below freezing. Clothing freed humans from the tyranny of geography. They could follow migrating herds across vast distances rather than remaining near permanent shelters. More than any single tool, tailored clothing transformed cold from a lethal barrier into a manageable challenge. With mobility secured, humans needed reliable places to rest and regroup. In the open steppe where trees were scarce, they engineered remarkable shelters. At Mezherik in Ukraine, archaeologists uncovered the remains of multiple huts built primarily from mammoth bones. Massive femurs and skulls formed the structural framework, arranged in careful circles up to 20 feet across. Hides and turf sealed the walls. Inside, multiple hearths burned continuously. These were not crude lean-tos, but substantial dwellings capable of housing extended families through the longest winters. Similar bone structures appear at sites across Eastern Europe and Siberia. Caves offered natural alternatives where available. At sites like Chauvet and Lascaux in France, humans left behind stunning artwork. Lions, horses, mammoths, and abstract symbols, illuminated by flickering lamps fueled by animal fat. Smoke management was crucial. Dwellings featured strategic vents and draft channels that carried smoke upward while retaining heat. Food storage pits dug into permafrost functioned as natural freezers. Preserving meat for months, these shelters became centers of life, repair, and planning. Let us step inside one such encampment for a day in the life during the height of the glacial maximum. Dawn breaks over a frost-covered steppe. A family stirs inside their mammoth bone hut. The youngest child, perhaps 3 years old, is tucked beneath layers of fur. An elder, her joints aching from decades of cold and labor, feeds the central hearth with carefully saved bones and dried dung. Fire must never die. Losing it could mean catastrophe. Someone checks the smoke hole and adjusts a hide flap to control the draft. Breakfast consists of leftover roasted reindeer meat and marrow cracked from bones the night before. Marrow is a calorie-dense superfood in this environment, rich in fat that fuels both body and brain. While the adults prepare for the day, children learn by imitation. A young girl practices threading sinew through a bone needle, her small fingers growing deft through repetition. An older boy helps check traps set for small game like hares and ptarmigan. The group assesses their stores: dried meat, frozen fish from a nearby river, roots dug before the ground hardened, and the last of the summer berries preserved in fat. The men and some women prepare for a hunt. They inspect spears tipped with sharp flint points, atlails for added throwing power, and rawhide ropes. Knowledge of animal behavior is paramount. They know the seasonal movements of reindeer herds and the watering patterns of mammoths. A successful hunt requires coordination, patience, and courage. Today, they target a mammoth, a high-risk, high-reward endeavor. Mammoth hunting demanded sophisticated planning. Scouts tracked the herd for days, noting the condition of individual animals, wind direction, and terrain. The group chose a vulnerable target, perhaps an older bull separated from the main herd or a calf with its mother. Hunters approached downwind, using the landscape for cover. Some drove the animal toward a prepared ambush, perhaps a steep riverbank or natural pit. At the decisive moment, spears flew. The danger was extreme. A single swipe of a mammoth's tusk or a panic charge could kill or maim. Yet the payoff was enormous. A single adult mammoth could provide tons of meat, fat, bones, and hide. After a successful kill, the work intensified. The carcass was butchered on site using stone tools. Choice cuts were selected first. Fat was rendered for lamps and cooking. Hides were removed carefully for clothing and shelter repair. Sinew became thread and rope. Bones were set aside for tools, weapons, and future building materials. Nothing was wasted. The meat not consumed immediately was dried into jerky, or frozen in permafrost caches. This systematic use of every part solved the problem of seasonal scarcity and allowed groups to maintain larger, more stable communities. Back at camp, the day continues. Women process hides, scrape them clean, and begin stitching repairs on garments worn thin by travel and weather. Children gather what little fuel is available: twigs, bones, dung, and learn the names and uses of plants and animals. The elderly play vital roles. Their accumulated knowledge of weather patterns, animal migrations, healing plants, and successful strategies from past seasons is irreplaceable. Grandmothers teach the young while men are away. Cooperation was not a luxury, it was survival. Vulnerable members, children, pregnant women, the injured, and elders depended on the group's willingness to share resources and labor. In turn, their knowledge and emotional bonds strengthened social cohesion during the darkest months. Food strategies extended far beyond big game. Rivers and lakes, though frozen for much of the year, yielded fish through ice fishing or traps. Women and children dug for starchy roots in late summer and autumn. Berries and nuts were gathered and preserved in fat or dried. In coastal areas, shellfish and marine mammals supplemented diets. This broad-spectrum foraging reduced risk. When large game was scarce, smaller resources kept starvation at bay. Storage technologies, drying, smoking, freezing in permafrost, allowed surpluses to be carried forward, freeing people from constant daily searching and enabling time for tool-making, art, and social ritual. Symbolic culture flourished even in these harsh conditions. Ivory carvings, perforated shells, and ochre-stained objects appear in the record. The famous Venus figurines, small stylized female forms, have been found across thousands of miles, suggesting shared beliefs and long-distance exchange networks. Cave paintings, some created deep underground by the light of fat lamps, reveal sophisticated artistic skill and possibly spiritual practices. Music, likely produced with bone flutes and percussion, reinforced group identity. These cultural practices helped maintain morale and transmit knowledge when physical survival consumed most energy. As the ice sheets reached their maximum extent, human populations concentrated in southern refugia, warmer pockets in Iberia, Italy, the Balkans, and parts of East Asia. Genetic studies show repeated population bottlenecks, moments when numbers dropped dangerously low before rebounding, yet the combination of technological flexibility, social cooperation, and cognitive adaptability allowed Homo sapiens to persist where other species faltered. When the climate finally began to warm around 12,000 years ago, these hardened survivors were perfectly positioned to take advantage of new conditions. Megafauna declined, sea levels rose, and forests returned. The skills forged in ice, foresight, innovation, cooperation, proved transferable to agriculture, permanent settlements, and complex societies. The story of Ice Age survival reveals how ordinary human capacities, pushed to their limits, produced extraordinary outcomes. Fire, clothing, shelter, coordinated hunting, broad-spectrum foraging, and cultural bonding each addressed a specific existential threat and created the conditions for the next leap forward. These were not heroic individuals acting alone, but communities working together across generations. The next time you pull on a winter coat against the cold, remember the bone needles and carefully tanned hides that first made such protection possible. When you open your refrigerator or freezer and find food preserved through the winter, you are participating in a tradition of storage and planning that began on the mammoth steppe. When you gather with family or friends during the darkest days of the year, sharing warmth and stories, you echo the social bonds that carried our ancestors through the longest nights. Even the simple act of turning up the heat or lighting a candle connects you to that ancient mastery of fire. We live in comfort unimaginable to those who walked the frozen earth, yet the legacy of their struggle surrounds us. The planning, cooperation, and ingenuity that allowed humanity to survive the ice ages did not end when the glaciers retreated. They became the quiet foundation for civilization itself. In every warm home, every prepared meal, and every act of communal support during hardship, we carry their fire forward. And in that continuity lies a profound truth. The comforts we take for granted were earned across millennia of unimaginable challenge by ancestors who refused to surrender to the cold. Their story is not distant history. It is the living inheritance that still warms us today.